Welcome to the podcast of Hemisphere, the official journal of the European Hematology Association. Hemisphere's podcast presents insightful, expert discussions about recent hematology publications. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to this episode of the Hemisphere podcast. My name is Stephen Hibbs, and I'm a hematologist and clinical research fellow based at Queen Mary University of London, and I'm one of the scientific editors for Hemisphere. Now, it's almost too obvious to say, but COVID has changed and often dominated the research landscape over the last 3 years, including in hematology. Researchers have made progress in understanding how blood changes its behavior as a result of COVID, how patients with hematological conditions are best treated for COVID, and how our services should change as a result of the pandemic. So COVID has changed the academic focus of many researchers, but it's also changed their jobs and lived experiences of what it's like to do research. Today, I'm joined by two researchers who have worked on this question by surveying the pandemic experience of laboratory and clinical scientists across the Young EHA network. They published their findings in Hemisphere last year in the aptly named Long COVID of Researchers, What to Do Next. So welcome, Eleni and Alba. Can I ask you to introduce yourselves and to describe how your own researcher journeys led to your involvement in this work?
Hi, thank you for this welcome. I'm Eleni Gavrilaki from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, Greece. I'm part of the Young EHA committee. I'm very proud to be part of this young committee and to have created this work through this committee. And we can discuss further on this work in a little bit.
Hi, yes, very nice. And thanks a lot for the invitation to discuss this work. So my name is Alba Máiquez Díaz. I'm based in Barcelona in Spain. I'm a postdoctoral scientist working in chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And yeah, as Eleni said, so this all started from the Young EHA committee, and that's how we end up publishing this. And actually, there was that previous publication we already did, because we did 2 surveys, actually 3 surveys, to kind of understand the impact the pandemic was having and is currently still having on the young generation of researchers and clinicians. And I guess we can go through this podcast, because I think it is an important topic that we need to rise and discuss and to think what to do with.
Thank you both. So can I ask you a bit about how has the COVID pandemic affected your life as researchers, both kind of at the time of the peak pandemic and ever since?
So for me, it was important. It was an important hit because I just moved from Manchester a year before the pandemic. So I was doing a postdoc in Manchester, and then I got another position here in Barcelona. So it was by the time the lab running. I mean, everything running in the lab. After 1 year, it takes to start things and to set up all the experiments in the lab and everything. So we were just like, okay, we have things running, we can start, and then we stop, right? And we had to froze down the cell lines or the patient samples and go back home. And in Spain, I work at a hospital, so only people doing COVID related research or could go to work. So we kind of stay for about 2 or 3 months, and then it was slowly going back to the lab. So actually, it took me about a year to go fully back to what I was doing in March at that time. Yeah.
And when you did return, what was different?
So, well, it is different that, for instance, my group, many people work from home. There's a lot of computational biology going on in the department, so there was fewer people there. So it takes us as a group. It has taken us a while to kind of feel again that we were a group and we're getting together now and starting to feel normality now. We didn't have to do shifts because there was not many people working in the lab, but we were few people there. So it felt a little bit lonely still. And then obviously we have grants that are finishing now, 3 years after they started, and there's no publication yet because there's been a gap that has been a long time to recover. And even though we got some extension, there's still an impact that, well, I haven't got my publication and I need to go to the next round of grant writing, and that's challenging.
So just picking up on one of the points there of the sort of getting back towards normality, I was interested to see in your survey the table 1 that kind of summarized a lot of the concerns and the hoped for support that people reported during the pandemic. And I noticed that there was this kind of sense in which people missed what you summarized as casual chats with peers. And there was a bit more, I guess, suspicion of the idea of these organized support meetings. And I just wanted to ask you a bit more of your own experience of that, of what did these sort of support meetings feel like, either for you or for your respondents? Did they feel meaningful, or did they feel more of a kind of token gesture at that time?
That's a really interesting question, actually. And we wanted through the survey to give all the scientists and hematologists and researchers the opportunity to express themselves through open questions. And through these questions, we had very interesting answers and some things that we would never actually think. So even if you work, I think, in a smaller or larger institute, this informal question and answers with fellows and other scientists and even esteemed scientists in their field might give you very important hints for your next experiment, as we have all experienced, or an idea for another grant or something like that. I think that was what people were trying. We felt lonely in the lab without other people. So even for a very small thing like what would you suggest to do better in this experiment? That can be an idea from a technician, or a very important thing that can be an idea from an esteemed professor. I think working together with people gives you this unique opportunity. I think the problem is even larger in early career researchers and researchers that are from countries that do not have such a network of research or scientists or hematologists to work with. And we are trying to represent all these categories and raise their voice, and trying to be optimistic and find new things that can be done in the future.
If I might add on that, or what Eleni, so one of the main things we found, and actually I think that's part of the Young EHA committee, is that this network you have. So actually this idea of the survey started, we did a call within the committee during the pandemic, when some, like the Southern Europe countries, we were already locked down, and the Northern European countries were not yet. And we were discussing, and we were like, oh, what's going to happen? And it was this idea of this stress and anxiety we were suffering, on how we could help from the committee, to the researchers and clinicians that were feeling the same. And that's where it started, to do the survey. Can we assess what's the impact? Can we suggest or push towards changes that needed, or support that is needed for the younger generations? And for me, that represents these informal meetings, and this fact that as junior members, you don't need to wait to enroll into a mentoring program that is within your institution, that is already there. That is great if it's there, and you should, and you will benefit, but you could also do your own network and your own support group. And for me, this is key. And for me, this is one of the key messages from both the surveys and from both articles we published. That is, just look for what you need, and what thing you need in science. And COVID has shown us is that if you do network, science goes faster and it's better, because you interchange support, as Eleni was saying, ideas and research and so on. And to give a personal example, actually with a group of friends, also during COVID and just afterwards, we had a WhatsApp chat with my friends from the PhD from Madrid, and we are all over the places. There's some in the States, some in London, some in Belgium. And we, at some point during COVID, we said, why don't we start doing this regularly? Why don't we meet regularly and do such a support peer group? And we started, and now it's been a year, and we meet every month, and we discuss, a part of chatting in the WhatsApp, whatever we want about our lives. We have formal structured meetings to support with peers. There's some that are already group leaders. There's some that we're still senior postdocs. And that's instrumental for all of us to continue and to feel supported, to feel what to do next, how to handle difficult situations with or without COVID. But I think that's one of the things that COVID has given us. We can do online peer support meetings with people and we can build them easily. You don't need to do something very complicated. And for me, that's one of the main messages from this article. Yeah.
On that point of the messages that you want heard from this thing, like what you're talking about there, Albert, some researchers will be able to be in a position where they can sort of put together their own peer group. And I guess I'm aware that other people might be feeling so defeated and so isolated and so lonely that even that kind of feels a bit tricky to do. I'm interested to know what you think the message is to institutions and to kind of big organizations like IHA, about, I guess, particularly those who are kind of most vulnerable, most isolated in times like during the pandemic. What do you think are the messages to them about what really effective and meaningful support can look like?
Just doing things like IHA did, with saying, okay, this is an interesting topic. Let's listen to the young people. They supported us as a committee. We did a couple of webinars that they cover. There was like very supportive in saying, let's listen to what the younger generations said and need. I think for me that was one, and it is about having more grants. Obviously, there is always an issue with the money, but it's also with building structures that allow younger generation to do network within themselves and with senior clinicians and researchers. Eleni, I don't know if you have other.
Yes, and of course, I think another important message that we need to discuss is the action to reduce bureaucracy, and this is referring not only to IHA and other associations, but also, to government parties and everyone. And I think this also refers to physicians themselves. So we need to help the organizations and the funding bodies and everyone to reduce bureaucracy. And that was a main message from both surveys. And that is needed in order to not only to increase funding, but also to give better opportunities to early career researchers that do not have this structure to face bureaucracy. And I think there are already steps taken by IHA in order to reduce bureaucracy. And this was the voice of our surveys, both surveys. And this was covered by the majority, I think, of the responders.
You've both thought a lot about this question of what pandemic experience has been like, is like for young hematology researchers across Europe. I'm interested to know at this point, kind of looking back at the work you've done, what's the missing pieces? What's the gaps? What do you wish you did know, either that you'd asked in the survey or that you'd have to use other methods to find out? What do you feel like, actually, we're not really sure what this part of the experience was like, or what these people think? Can you speak to that, of anything else that you'd want to find out?
Well, I guess there was many things, because we were kind of naive when we started and we had never done something like this. So I guess one thing first would be to have more answers so we could group better the data, and say, for instance, we don't have much answers from Eastern Europe countries, which is a completely different story, probably. And we couldn't really compare between European countries to see what was the differences on that sense. That would be one. The other one would be we didn't have enough sample also to compare between genders, which was another idea, right? Whether it will be more effective in one gender, like female researchers versus male clinicians and researchers. We couldn't do that, and that would have been interesting. And there was other people doing that as well. There was other articles that were covering that. I guess, we didn't see many differences. So we have basically junior or younger early career clinicians and scientists answering, so we couldn't really compare. So we didn't see difference between, for instance, postdoc and young PIs, and probably that's fair because it's not that. I mean, it is hardly different, but you're kind of in a phase where you need data you need to process, right? We see that people that were more established, for instance, you could do computer work, you could write articles, you could do things during the pandemic or even afterwards, even because you have already a trajectory. Well, the more younger generation did not, right? So they were more like, if I don't do experiments, there's nothing I can do, and they were suffering more that. But we didn't have enough data from more senior people to kind of compare if that was really a significant difference on the impact, which you would predict. But yeah.
Thank you. So, final question. Let's say, this is a horrible thing to think about, but imagine in 5 or 10 years, we've got another awful pandemic coming at us down the road. What would be the number one thing, the most important thing you think we could do as a research community now to get ready for supporting our researchers, particularly young researchers, through that made up coming pandemic?
I think that the COVID has given us many tools, to try to fight another pandemic. But I think we will never be prepared for something like that to happen again. Nevertheless, one of the most important things is to have this different sense of immediate action that needs to be taken in all fields. So not only in the medical field, in the research field, in the research bodies, in the funding bodies, and these supporting mechanisms for all these fields, so that we can work together to fight its pandemic or its threat or everything. So I think the most important lesson from COVID is that we have to work quickly and we have to work together. So that needs to have a trigger so that people, get out of their routine and work in this field. And I, in my very personal point of view, I don't think we will ever be prepared, but we will have the feeling and try to look back at the positive things that were done through COVID.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that maintaining the networks to be able, because I think that was the key lesson, one of the key lessons, right? That if we are connected within the world of clinicians and scientists and we share information, data quickly, then we can cope with these critical situations. If we are isolated, not even within groups, but even within countries, then, and that was something we didn't do right at the beginning of the COVID. It was more like, something is not going to happen to us, so who cares? Now probably we're more smart in that sense and say like, it might happen, so let's exchange information. And that was actually one of the things that came up. We did a seminar in the annual conference of EHA last year discussing this actually, and we invited a couple of more senior and more early career clinicians and scientists to discuss what was the kind of positive, if there's gonna be some positive take-home message from these last years. And that was one of the things, like the research and clinical networks that have been built that are new and are allowing to speed up research in many other diseases, not only COVID. And you can see that. You can see how these structures are being now, and you can see them in grants now that people ask for grants that are from teams that were built through COVID, and they want to maintain that and use it for a different disease, which is very interesting across disciplines, right? That we were not maybe connecting different medical disciplines that now are interconnected and they've worked together. So I think we need to maintain that for any reason, but especially if there will be the hopefully not situation that we have another pandemic, that would speed up the response.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Eleni. Thank you so much, Alba, both for the work you've done and for sharing with us today on the Hemasphere podcast. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening in today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Hemasphere podcast. All of Hemisphere's content is open access and can be found at www.hemispherejournal.com. We hope you will join us for future podcast episodes.